Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's free TPC training public webinar on the topic of on-the-job training, using on-the-job training to verify your training investment. Today, I'm going to be talking to you. My name is Ryan Smith, Product Manager here at TPC Training. I am in charge of looking after our customer experience on the side of our training solutions for instructor-led training in our TPC Operate platform. There's a lot of stuff going on in the training industry today, a lot of different trends, especially when it comes to doing training in the 21st century. So I want to fill you in on one in particular aspect of training, and that is on-the-job training, which turns out to be very, very important in the side of training. So before we get started in this discussion, I want to make sure everyone knows that this seminar is being recorded. So we're going to have this webinar up on the website here in a couple business days after this broadcast. So you'll be able to watch it back, and I'll be sure to send you all a link to this webinar's discussions and recording from our website. I'll send you all an email after this, as well as a PDF of all these slides. These will be made available to all of you here on this webinar. Secondly, I wanted to let everyone know that this webinar is interactive, so you are free to ask me questions. This is live in the moment, so let's interact. And how to do so is, if you see your screen share right here with my cover slide here, you can go to the bottom of your screen or to the top of your screen. You should see a toolbar, and you can access the chat function, chat. And when you go into that chat window and select who you want to chat to, and you can use the pull down menu and try to select me, Ryan Smith, or alternative to that would be a panelist. And you can go ahead and chat me a message, and that can be your way to ask me any questions about the topic today that you may have been curious about. And at the end of the session, I'll be sure to take as many of your questions as possible. So I expect this to be about a 20 to 30 minute presentation total, and we can have a good interactive discussion at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So on-the-job training. I'm sure you've all heard the whole 70-20-10 model, especially those of you in the training industry. I just want to cover this really quickly to talk about how people in today's world learn. Lots of studies have been done on this, and they've all circled around this concept of the 70-20-10 learning model of how people learn. 10% of people's learning comes from what we classically define as the classic style of learning, sitting in the classroom, taking courses, reading books, basically the idea of what you hear. 10% of what you hear is stuff that people are actually maintaining and learning long term. The 20% is learned through what you see. So someone showing you how to do that thing you're looking to learn. So this can be a mentor or a coach showing you specifically on how to do the task at hand. And then finally, 70% of our learning happens on the job, okay? Or what you do, right? So actually doing the task or the job, gaining the actual experience of doing the job. So when it comes to, let's say, doing technical electrical work or doing a very detail-oriented job assignment, actual experience doing the job is the quickest and most effective way to learn and maintain and retain how to do that job effectively. But that is not to discount the other ones, because they have their place too. And so we're going to talk about where this 70% ties into the 20 and ties into the 10. When it comes to on-the-job training, it's a little bit of the top two here, mostly what you do. So gaining new experience in doing or doing the experience, but also what you see. So the whole mentorship approach, that's all a good part of a robust on-the-job training program. So what is on-the-job training, right? We usually in the training industry call it OJT. On-the-job training really has a structure to it. So the best on-the-job training is something that you have written down, and that's going to be the most important thing to take away from this presentation, that no on-the-job training program is complete without a set of documented requirements and documented objects and documents to work off of. And we're going to talk about what those could be. So what is it? Well, you're learning the essential tasks of the job under the guidance of a trusted trainer and mentor. So someone who's an expert on the job, someone who has been doing the job for quite a number of months or years, showing you the ropes, right? That's a big important part of OJT. You should not be expected to do on-the-job training by yourself. I think all of us have learned that lesson the hard way, maybe have had jobs in the past where it's like, all right, welcome to the job, good luck out there kind of thing. And you want to try to avoid that approach. Really pair people with trusted mentors, because then they can really show you the correct way to do things, and not only correct but safest way to do things. So there is a really well agreed upon process for on-the-job training in the industry, and that is starting with introducing a given task, then practicing that task with the guidance and supervision of the mentor, and then verifying performance of the task. So this is a critical 3-step process. Now, one trap I would say that we fall into when we're training people on the job and in the industry is that we have, let's say, the person identified as the quote unquote mentor say, all right, come this way. I do the job this way. Are you watching? Do it this way, doing it this way. All right, now you do it. All right, that's good. You're all trained up. That's good to go, and you're out the door. The problem with that approach to on-the-job training is that nothing was written down or documented. There was no paper trail or no verification to show that this person learned this task at this time. So what if we could take this introduction, practice, and verification step and have it written down, right? Because if you're following the mentor around and kind of learning the way they're telling you to and kind of keeping it up in your brain, all that knowledge can walk out the door whenever you walk out the door. And that knowledge can walk out the door whenever that mentor walks out the door. So really having a documented set of what it takes to do this task right, in terms of list of tasks that you need to introduce, practice, and verify for a given job title are really important. And the trouble with doing it kind of by hand is that you don't get these sign-offs from the mentor or trainee for each step. And you don't have what we call the tribal knowledge. That's the term I like to use a lot, is that when people are just talking about it and doing training that isn't documented, it's all tribal knowledge. It's all through word of mouth. And that leaves the company at risk of kind of losing that very critical tricks of the trade and best practices. So documentation. No on-the-job training is complete without good documentation. So someone's learning path, someone's journey of learning in your job might take a trajectory similar to this one. So let's talk about this one, where there's 3 main phases of a person's learning. And I've set up training programs like this in the past of my career as well, where step 1, or phase 1, let's say, is that the individual will learn about doing the job in the classroom, right? They'll get trained in the classroom in a formal environment. And this is a really good way to start, because you're learning best practices, right? You're learning in a safe environment where you're free to ask questions, right? And not only are you learning best practices, you're learning why things work the way they work, right? You're learning why your work is so important and why you got to do things a certain way, and how to be safe, right? You can talk about safety on the job, but really hitting it home in the classroom is a really important way of doing so. So you're learning in the classroom, but we all know you're not soaking in everything you're hearing in the classroom. So you gotta start applying that to the job eventually. So step 2 is you get paired up with a mentor, let's say, for one of the experts in the job, and they start showing you how to do the job the correct way, right? So now you learn about the best practices in the classroom. Now you're seeing those best practices in action and how they can be realistically performed every day on the job. You're learning those tricks of the trade, those little tricks that the people on the job know from years or months on the job. And you're learning through interaction. You're talking, you're interacting, you're gaining a relationship with the mentor. Everything's going really well. Then step 3, right? You're learning about the job by doing the job. So the mentor steps aside, and then you start doing the job for yourself. But the key here is that you continue working under the supervision of the mentor while your training is considered still training, right? And in doing so, this mentor can work off documented checklists. And let's say you do something the wrong way, you'll be learning from those mistakes, and you'll be experiencing that higher level of, let's say, stress and exertion to do the job the right way, right? So this is where really the brain is really firing at all cylinders here. The 70% learning is happening, right? So the 10% is happening in the classroom. 20% of that person's learning is happening through mentorship and being shown around. And step 3, really that big bulk of learning is the 70%. The key on step 3 here, this is really where OJT is. On the job training is in step 2 and step 3 here. Reinforcing what you learned in the classroom and from the mentor, right? That's really what doing the training on the job is all about. So let's think about it this way in terms of the reinforcement. Let's say you had your department, let's say your maintenance department or your production department or another department, let's say everyone in the facility, come into your training room and you had a trainer come on site and you went through a certain topic, let's say electrical safety for the entire staff. Right? Then step 2, you're shown how to implement those safety steps, let's say from your supervisor or from your fellow mentor training, and then you're learning how to do those things on the job, right? Now, guaranteed that some people forgot some of the things they learned in the classroom. Let's say you spent really good money for this class in your facility. That's really where you want to verify that investment you made to do that formal training by verifying that people can learn what they learned in the classroom and maintain what they learned in the classroom on the job. So these checklists, these OJT checklists are really important in doing so. Not everyone learns at the same rate, and it's really good to monitor who's learning what and how things are getting absorbed and learned in your facility. So let's talk about costs real quick, right? So this is really what it's about in terms of training investment. Let's say your classroom training costs you about $2,000 per learner, right? Let's say it's a whole week training or 2 days or 4 days, whatever that training might have been. Orientation, right? Costs of labor, and then not to mention the unproductive time while they're off the floor, right? But those are costs that all are factored into it. So a lot of companies start seeing training as just a cost sink, like, right? Just cost. And not to mention when you're doing mentorship, that mentor is taking time away from his or her job and not doing nearly as much production as they would otherwise. And the labor hours of the mentor and learner are also part of the cost. And then when you're on the job training, things are just going a little bit slower as you're trying to learn the ropes of the job. So these are all costs, right, to training that companies might see is a barrier to actually doing good training in your facility. So what are the benefits then, right? What are the benefits of training? Well, I'm sure those of you who are doing training now can really talk to the benefits. Let's all make sure we're on the same page, that we can talk to our individuals in our company. What are the values of training, right? You spent $2,000 to send someone to a classroom. What are you getting for that investment, right? Well, right off the bat, especially in places that are machine heavy, manufacturing, where you're doing things and producing things, reducing your downtime and increasing your efficiency is really the biggest draw to training in general. I love to ask this in the classrooms that I teach is, what does it cost you in your facility for 1 hour of downtime? I want you to think about that. Let's say one of your main machines of production shuts down for 1 hour. How much might that cost your company? And then I want you to think, how does that relate to a cost of a training class, right? And how many minutes or how many hours of downtime would I need to save by being properly trained and reducing that downtime to begin with? Let's say you get specifically trained on how to do better at troubleshooting issues when your machines shut down, right? And how to get them back running, let's say just 15 minutes quicker. I've definitely talked to companies where the downtime factor is, $10,000 every hour minimum, right? It is being lost. So if you just save 15 minutes of time, guess what? You already paid that person's training back. If you're able to just save 50 minutes on one occasion, right? By being more smart about the way you do the job. Not to mention reducing safety incidences. This is a really underlooked potential thing. A lot of people see safety investments as a big cost sink as well in many cases. But the first time you have a safety incident, you'll know how costly safety incidents can be. And proper training on the front end is a low low quantity of investment compared to the amount of costs you would incur if someone got seriously hurt in your facility, from workers' compensation all the way over to OSHA violations and fines. So you want to try to avoid all that kind of stuff. Not only that, but there is the soft and fuzzy component of benefits to training as well, which are increasing the skill level of your workforce, right? This can actually be brought back to quantification. Increasing the skills of your workforce means that talent, that ability, that know-how stays in your four doors, and you can maintain that talent and keep them happy, right? Not only that, the culture of advancement and development in your company, right? You're helping people learn, you're helping them be better versions of themselves. Therefore, they're going to stick around and morale increases, and the culture of the company just becomes that much more positive and beneficial. So that's another thing to keep in mind for training. But since we're talking about on-the-job training, what are the benefits of a good documented on-the-job training in particular? Well, the key is that you're using that training to verify and to reinforce what was learned in the classroom, right? And making sure you're keeping track of how well that learner is retaining the information in the classroom, right? Because, there's been a few people who, let's say you have a class of 20 people, and let's say one of those 20 people that you sent to training was sleeping during the training, right? I think you would know it by the time you're verifying that on the job. So really assessing that trainability of the learner for future training endeavors, right? If you send someone to training and they're on their phone the whole time, or they're not paying attention to the topic, you'll know that by doing the on-the-job training assessments, right? Not to mention this last topic here, developing a clearly defined worker qualification program. So this gives people a path, right? If you have a clear list of tasks that you need to be able to complete for given jobs in your on-the-job training program, then you give people a path on here's the things you need to know to be qualified to do certain jobs. And you can give people a path of, again, for advancement and qualification in your facility. So that's really how on-the-job training can be used to verify your investment in the classroom training or in the mentorship training from that reduced downtime. So I talked about it. You need proper documentation. Well, what does that documentation look like? What are some of those tools looking like for on-the-job training? And while I'm here, I'm just going to remind you all that you can send me chat messages. So if there's questions that are popping up in your mind about what is he talking about with on-the-job training, or here's what I do in my facility, what would you recommend? Whatever you want to chat to me in that chat box, just type it away, send it to the panelists or send it to me. I'll make sure I'll be able to answer that, okay? So our question and answer is coming up here in just a couple minutes. So what are some of the essential tools for on-the-job training? So these are things that normally are seen on paper, right? Mentor checklists is the first and foremost important one, right? Where this on-the-job training checklist that the mentor is going to sign off, where they introduce the task to you, you practice the task, and then they sign off that they verify that you are performing the task to their requirements. Right? Very important. But also, on the job, you're getting trained to the standard operating procedures in your facility, right? How to properly start up a machine, how to properly close down a shop at the end of the night, how to properly clean your workspace. All this stuff needs to be followed on the standard operating procedures and can be signed off on as well. Job safety analyses, similar to SOPs in a lot of ways, but they take the extra step of assessing risk of each step along the standard operating procedure and testing the learner and testing the worker on how risky each of those steps are. If you don't have JSAs in your facility, they probably take another name, maybe JHA or risk assessments, a bunch of different forms that these safety analyses can take. Process flows. So I've worked in a few facilities now where the process is quite complex, where if someone's learning how to do a job and they see these gigantic machines, they're going to get overwhelmed. But seeing it all broken down on process flows and being able to test them and train them on these process flow diagrams are hugely essential tools for on-the-job training. And on a related note, if you can ever procure and secure your machine schematics, right, to the machines that people are working on, and be able to follow what's on the schematic with what they're seeing in person. But not only that, we always say that one of the two most important tools you need for any troubleshooting is a proper schematic. So training people how to troubleshoot on the job, let's say for maintenance or for production, being able to read the machine schematic is huge and a very important part of on-the-job training. Now these schematics, you might be wondering, well, where are my schematics? Do I have schematics for let's say my boiler room or for my machines? Well, sometimes they're hard to come by, aren't they? Sometimes they're rolled up in a corner somewhere. Sometimes they're coffee stained or ripped up or all torn up. That's kind of how the industry has moved toward machine schematics, but there are smarter ways to maintain them in the 21st century, and that's what we got to talk about, because it doesn't matter whether it's machine schematics, process flows, job safety analysis, standard operating procedure, up until basically this last decade or so, how have we had to manage all these documents? In a gigantic filing cabinet that's unorganized, it's messy, and it's really hard to know where to find these things. Maybe they're in a dust-covered binder somewhere out on the floor, covered in dust, or maybe they're just all over the place, and you got to ask different people to find them, right? This makes the process of on-the-job training really difficult if you don't know where to find all your documentation. If these checklists are flying all around, they're hard to deal with. But what if we could take this on-the-job training into the 21st century here, which this type of technology exists now, guys, with the advent of tablets and computers that can be fully mobile. You can have all these forms. You can have all these on-the-job training tasks and assignments on mobile technology here. Here's an example of a mobile format for the very same stuff that you'd see flying around in papers. Now you can see them on all shown on your tablet screen. So imagine, let's say the person's done with the classroom, you hand them an iPad and say, all right, here's your mentor. You guys go out with the iPad and you start working through this set of checklists, right? And then they take this and you're just working through the checklists on that iPad. Very easy to maintain, very easy to check your progress, and very easy to see what you have to do next in terms of your training path with that mentor. This is called mobile forum technology, right? There's a lot going on in the space, and definitely TPC's in that space too. 10% of your learning journey is just in the classroom. The other 90% can be really made smooth by using this type of stuff. You might say, well, how about the signatures and the official parts of these? Guys, styluses and even your own index finger can be used to sign things, and we've been doing it in these new shops for the last several years and months now, where they turn the cash register towards you. You're signing your signature right on the iPad. You do the same thing here using these forms and makes them just as official as anything on paper would be. And then the checklists, those SOPs, the JSAs, your machine schematics are all stored and organized electronically on a platform, right? So then, oh, I need machine schematic or SOP for machine number 12. You just scroll down to machine number 12, click it, and everything opens up, and you're talking about it with your learner. It's pretty easy. Not only that, right? It's organized by job, department, machine, or process. Technology is available now that you don't need binders, notebooks, filing cabinets, etc. So there's really a lot to do here. And really, since a lot of this stuff is cloud-based nowadays, you can access it from any device. So it doesn't have to be loaded onto an iPad. As long as you have a browser, or as long as you have an app store, you can get this stuff and then you'll have access to it. Zoom in and interact with the machine schematics for training and troubleshooting. And now there's technology where you can actually make your schematics interactive, right? So you can click on components on your schematic. It brings up a picture. It brings up the spec sheets. It brings up all the information about those schematics. And then finally, right? Hopefully this never happens to anyone, but if you ever get OSHA knocking on your door, right? And asking, where is your training documentation, right? You'll have some documentation of how your on-the-job training is going. And so with that really sums up the presentation of some of the trends and some of the things happening on the job training today. With that, I'll go ahead and pause and take your questions. If there are any questions, I'll just give a couple free moments for you to type your questions in. But if you are generating any curiosity about on-the-job training and you're maybe hoping that you can work on some of this stuff yourself, right? And maybe need to do it a little bit more yourself, definitely get in contact with us at TPC Training. We can help you kind of talk it out, work it out on how on-the-job training might need to look for you. We definitely are experts in training here. Email us at sales@tpctraining or just call our phone number here and just get started talking to us. It doesn't cost anything to just start chatting about it with someone who's an expert in it. So that's really all I have on the job training today. And if any other questions come up, always feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for being here and have a great day.